So let's talk about identity. You were born in Czechoslovakia. You fled with your parents to France. You lived here. You lived in Israel for 50 years. You live in LA. Where do you feel at home?
Nowhere. No, it's too easy to say nowhere. You know, when I come back to these areas, here, Neris-les-Bains, Montluçon, or to France, I see all I know the history, and I see all the very problematic aspects of that society, yet I feel a kind of familiarity. But then the strange thing is I sense this a different, a more ambiguous familiarity in Germany. That is because of the culture, because of the language, mostly here, but also there. In Israel, well, Israel was a place of choice. I came to Israel to rebuild an identity from all the lost identities of childhood and teenage. And I did to a point, and then I started losing that new identity because in great part because of what I sensed was the political transformation. And you see, Los Angeles, or the United States in general, but Los Angeles because that's where I am for almost 20 years now teaching, is a place which has no identity at all. The city and this whole, California. And therefore, maybe I find, don't forget Switzerland. I spent many years in traveling between Jerusalem and Geneva, teaching in both places, then Tel Aviv and Geneva. So we forgot Switzerland as an element, and to me unidentifiable, and of course California is the epitome of nowhere, in the sense of, at least in my sense of identity. So I really feel partly at home in a place which has no cultural identification as far as I'm concerned. I regret it, I miss it, and I sometimes wonder where would people ask me, where will you live when you retire? I mean, you know, next year. I don't know, probably stay in California, but it could be as well somewhere else. So I feel at home nowhere, but I could also adapt almost to any place. I mean, today it's a little bit late in the game, but I easily adapt because I speak the languages, I know enough of the background, so I am a very adaptable person, which is not a good thing.
In what language do you write?
I did write for decades in French. And now I start my two last, the two big volumes. The historical work was written directly in English. Now my English is not perfect, far from it. I mean, even in the most basic sense. So, you know, there are copy editors and things like that. Naturally, I would tend to write in French, but I decided as I live in the States, I will simply write in English.
In what language do you dream?
I don't know. I probably dream, as strange as it may sound, in 2 or 3 languages, but I never know in which language I dream. I don't remember, and I don't try to remember. Because, you know, when I am in the States, I think in English. When I come here, I easily think in French. I can think in German, less so, but, and of course in Hebrew.
But your basic language at home with your parents was Czech and German?
It was Czech and German. I think that my parents spoke German. My mother's family, in any case, is from the Sudetenland. which is German-speaking. It was the German-speaking part of Bohemia, of Czechoslovakia, that is, which was then annexed after Munich to Germany. They spoke German, I therefore spoke German. German was very familiar to me, but I spoke Czech with the nanny. The nanny was Catholic, was very religious, so she taught me religious songs in Czech, you see. So I had these two languages, but then I learned French very quickly when we came here in '39. By 1940, I was absolutely fluent in French. And so I spoke the three languages, and then the older languages slowly went to the background. But my French became my mother tongue, if I may say.
What do you speak with your children?
Hebrew.
Hebrew.
Yeah.
But you never wrote in Hebrew?
No. I even have difficulties, not that I read in Hebrew, but strangely enough, I never wrote in Hebrew, and I never made an effort to read. Yes, when I was in high school, the last year of high school I spent already in Israel. It was just 48, 49. 50, I got my high school degree in 50, my baccalaureate. And by then I was absolutely fluent in Hebrew, and actually I read Dostoevsky in Hebrew, in its Hebrew translation, but then I dropped that. And reading in Hebrew, I can, of course, I read every day. When I'm there, I read the newspaper or things like that. But I wouldn't read literature in its Hebrew translation or Hebrew original. I could, but I don't feel like it.
Amos Grossman, you don't read in Hebrew?
Well, not in Hebrew. I prefer reading it in English translation. Both Amos Oz and Grossman and Aleph Bet Yoshua, all of them I know personally and I admire, but I prefer reading their work in English translation or in French to make it simply quicker and easier.
When thinking of Israel, you told me that your relationship with Zionism very much developed in a negative sense during the time. Could you say that, and you were active in the 80s in peace now.
Right.
Do you think that although you live in Los Angeles now, that you should still be heard in your opinions about Israel over there?
That's what people say, but I am not of that opinion. I never like to express myself in a very politically committed way about Israel when I lived outside. I think it's wrong. That is, if you visit some place and somebody asks you, then it's fine. But if you live in Los Angeles and things are happening in Israel, like now or like over all the years since I live in Los Angeles, I don't think it's right. To me, it's something is basically wrong about living outside and giving you advice about things which sometimes mean for those who live there or life and death. That is peace, war, things like that. Why, if you don't choose to live, and then keep your opinions to yourself.
Do you feel that the intellectuals in Israel are more isolated than elsewhere?
No, because there's a strong intellectual scene. Intellectuals are very committed to the political development of the country, the political evolution. They fight mostly against what's going on. They are very much listened to by a segment of society doesn't mean that it has an impact necessarily, but I wouldn't say they're isolated. And Israel, at least this has to be said, is a democracy. So you can express yourself. You are not in any danger in saying the worst things about people in power. It's not Latin America or many other places where you suddenly get killed because you express yourself. No, no, no. Israel, in that sense, you know, if there is one good thing which remains and hasn't changed, is the freedom you have to say what you mean.
But if that has no impact?
Well, that happens in many places, but surely in Israel it's a much more essential matter. That is, the country is moving into a direction. Now again, there are these peace talks, and many of us, I mean, I personally am very pessimistic about it, but you never know. So you have these peace talks, and it may be suddenly changing ground. The fact is nonetheless that society is moving to the right, that Israeli society, from a kind of majority dominated, some would say, by a kind of liberal socialist ideology and regime in the 50s, 60s, 70s, became at the end of the 70s a more right-wing society, or already after, it started after the Six-Day War in the late 60s, but it may, depends. You can calculate when it started. It may have, some would say it started with Zionism, never mind. It moved more and more, and nowadays you have a majority right-wing society, you have a right-wing government. So it is moving. And in that sense, of course, those intellectuals we are discussing remain not isolated, but remain on the margins in terms of impact. Yet,
whoa. Wait a sec. One thing that I wonder, I had planned to go with you to Israel, and I thought of taking you with the Mahsom Watch women to see a border post or a checkpoint. Would you have gone with me?
yes, I would have gone. But again, I would have gone, yeah. But I would have felt not in my right place. I would have gone years ago when I was active, let's say in Peace Now. Then I would have gone with enthusiasm. But today, again, living in Los Angeles, I mean, going with you would have been for a film. It would be an expression or stating a position, I agree. But it would not, I would feel ill at ease because I'm really not taking real responsibility for my actions by going somewhere and then taking the plane a few days later, you know. I feel, I don't know, it may be a mistake, but I feel I'm very sensitive on this issue.
Do you think that the Mahsom Watch people are taking the place, the position that Peace Now had in the 80s?
Yes, but there are so many subdivisions in those movements. Some are very, very radical. Some are more moderate. Yes, but they are, you see, Peace Now had a real, I think, it had an impact, even on a government like the Begin government. Whether this Mahsom, people going to the Mahsomim, right, in Hebrew, the plural is Mahsomim, and standing there or trying to help people, Palestinians, to cross and so on, or being there to document the attitude of the soldiers. Yes, it's morally very, it's the right thing to do, in my opinion. Whether it is as much, peace now had a place in society. Whether the Marsom-Watch today means much, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know.
Okay, let's call it an afternoon.
May I ask you?
Really?
Yes?
I was wondering, you just said that you consider it not very good to be adaptable.
It's not very good to be adaptable.
That's what you said.
Yes. Well, you're asking.
No, well,
okay.
it's fine. You're sure.
Yeah.
Answer me.
I will explain that. I would have preferred to have what I meant when I said it's not good to be adaptable is it has two components, this answer. It means that I have an identity which was fractured and never developed as a strong, I wouldn't say monolithic, nobody has a monolithic identity, but a kind of coherent identity, and that means the past was already a handicap, and it also is in many ways like political action, let us say, or political statements, strong statements, which I understand and feel. I really, because of this multi-composition, I feel ill at ease very often in expressing, as I explained, in expressing myself in a strong way, because I don't belong to the place about which I express myself. I don't say that anybody today can be monolithic, that is impossible. But at least have a strong core. Now I have a core, which is the past. And my whole work actually shows that I have a very strong core and kind of guideline that is history, and that is the Nazi years and the Holocaust. But that does not necessarily imply the possibility of a coherent mode of expression about ongoing political, social issues.
So do you feel certain that writing history and making people aware of history, that it makes sense, that it helps, that...
Yes, in that sense, if I may say, whatever I was able to do, my life makes or made sense. But that is certainly a core which has been mine since always, since I started. But to my mind, it's not enough. It's true that I carry my house in a way on my back, but stuck on my back also, from place to place. Stuck, you understand what I mean. And in that sense, making something out of an impediment, that is having a house stuck on your back, maybe doing the best you can of a handicapped situation. But at least I did it. Most people in my situation and in my age, let's say, or older, had the handicap and not the strength or the possibility or whatever to turn it into, well, something positive.
Thank you, Mr.
Minher, was it all right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, sometimes